All right, good morning, everyone. My name is Joanna. I am a solutions engineer here at Ovaledge, and today I'm joined by our founder and CEO, Sharad Varshney. Sharad, how are you doing this morning?
Very good, Joanna. How are you?
I'm doing great. So I'm really
Wonderful.
excited for today's topic. We're going to be looking at data governance as a defensive and offensive approach to, meeting some of the crucial needs that our business confronts on the day to day, right? So
Yeah.
before we get started, I just wanted to ask you, Sharad, as we kind of jump in, um, why do you think that data governance is so prominent right now? Why do you think it's such a hot topic? Um, throughout across all industries?
That's a very good question, Joanna. I think it's hot because the data is hot, and uh, and people want to create the value out of the data, and they're struggling to create the value out of the data. It's not a creating out of like, for example, when the digitization revenue, when the SAP started happening, it was kind of like companies led through it, and it was a single monotonous approach that they can create
Mhm.
application, they can create the value out of it. Now the thing is with the data is this is what you have. You cannot buy new data. You cannot whatever the data you have to create the value from it, and the value
Right.
comes by optimization of your existing business processes, or creating a new marketing campaign, or maybe the creating a top line or improving a bottom line. So so data is a medium to optimize your business whatever the way you want to do it. And
Mhm.
the governance plays an important role, because without governance you cannot optimize, because all the data department have to be aligned, the businesses have to be aligned, everybody need to be aligned together. And people are trying to take a data approach for, oh no, I can create a data product and I can sell in the market. That is not working out, because it's not a specific commodity like oil where you can just go and sell it very easily.
Mhm.
It's not a direct use cases. The data is an indirect medium, and that is why the people have realized that without data governance they cannot move forward in their data value creation process. And as the AI is coming up, AI is fueled by the data, whether it's a proprietary, right now the generic AI is most about the old data, which is the public data available.
Right.
Now, the
Right.
more of the proprietary data companies have, it would be more around that data, and then data need to be properly governed. Then only they would be able to use it. Otherwise, garbage in, garbage out. Whether it's a analytical model or AI model or any model you put it there. So if the data is not high quality, it cannot be the whatever you will create, the AI models or something, it will not be high quality. So it's very
Mhm.
important to use a high quality data in your any value creation process of the data, whether it's AI or analytics or master data management or whatever you do it. It have to be that, and that is where this creating the need for data governance all around the places.
Yeah, that's a great explanation. Thank you for putting it that way. You put it very nicely. Um, so, in terms of, we wanted to talk a little in more detail today about data governance as both a defensive and offensive approach. What do we mean by that? When we're saying defense and offense, what are we trying to achieve?
Yeah. So mostly data governance understood as a defensive approach, in the sense that people think that they have to just do the data governance in order to make sure that I'm compliant with the law of the land, right? That is the general tendency to understand data, and they think, okay, we have to do the data governance because we have to comply with the law. But let me focus on analytics. Let me focus on machine learning, and the data governance is anybody is doing it. That is
Mhm.
a defensive approach. Like generally we use the defensive approach for the other kind of compliances which is there. You create a department, and mostly the CEOs are the one, or the authority with the signing it, but they're trying to minimize the budget there. They're not trying to focus too much. On the other side, their department like marketing or something will try to focus to quite a bit because it can directly affecting it. But the
Right.
offensive approach, what it does is that it converts the same techniques you have about data governance. It converts, create the efficiency in the process of data value creation, right? It improves the data adoption. So as you are creating the same technique of data governance to create the building the trust within the business community of the data, creating the efficiency of the data and more creating more data adoption, that becomes the data as an offense than data as a
Mm.
defense. Defense is more about compliance, regulatory compliance. It's ensuring the lights are on and then just making sure that the things are up to date. That is where the things was there. Earlier, people were doing the defensive approach because of the inavailability of the tools. So now the tools have speed up the process so much for the data governance that it is really become useful to do it in offense. Earlier it was not possible because the tools was not there. So people, you have to do it manually, all the work. So like, okay, it's too much work to do it. So better to use it just for the keep the lights on kind of thing, like
Okay.
keep the regulatory compliances.
So would you say that we're kind of talking, maybe a synonym for this would be we're talking about a reactive approach versus a more proactive, that now since we have those tools, we can approach data governance even more proactively while still having that different defensive techniques? Would you say that that would be another way to explain it?
I think that is a good, that is another way to explain it. Like this, let's say you are in a industry where um, it does not apply a law, right? So, say for example, you do not operate in California, you are not in a European Union, you are in Texas, and you are an oil company, right? So there is no regulation is applying to you, neither the laws application or neither a kind of a utility companies kind of regulations are there. But still, you can use for offensive reason for data governance. Of course, you have the companies which is operate in California and in Europe. They have to make sure that they are complying with the privacy laws. If they are banking company, then they have to make sure that they comply with the banking regulations. So the regulations
Right.
does not always dependent on every company, but the approach can be used for, there are other benefit, which is we call it
Okay.
which is productivity gain and more about like in building the trust of the data.
Okay. Yeah, thanks. That makes sense. So I want to drill into those different aspects here in a second, but I wanted to mention, please feel free for our audience that's joining us today. We're so happy to have you. Please feel free to drop any questions you have within the chat window. And also something to note here, we do have a blog that is capturing some of the aspects of our conversation today about offensive and defensive data governance. And we're going to drop that here in the chat. And we'll try to answer your questions along the way, but definitely want to be able to have interaction with our audience here today as well. So that sounds, I hope that sounds good to everyone. I want to drill in a little bit more now to defensive data governance, right? So can you give me a kind of quick summary of data governance as defense before we dive into this a little bit more?
So there are two aspects of the defense. One is the security, another is the compliance, right?
Mm-hmm.
Security, making sure that the data is secure, protected nicely, so that it does not breach, it does not have any kind of those kind of problem, right? So that is the security aspect of the data. The second is the compliance, and then when you say compliance, we can break into two parts. One is the privacy compliances, which is mostly to deal with the PII data, which is personally identifiable information data. Another one is the industry-specific compliances like BCBS 239, which is applicable to the banking and financial regulations. Like there is a government regulations for government agencies. So there are like industry-specific compliance. So the difference between them is the industry-specific compliance, let's say the banking regulations, is that when a bank report their annual reports or their quarterly reports or their specific things they have to report to the various organization, regulatory organization, they want to make sure that the data governance principles have been applied there, right? So suppose a report comes out of a bank, and if the numbers are wrong in that report, then the regulators really cannot do anything. Suppose the Silicon Valley Bank failed, and if they found that they were reporting the wrong numbers to the regulators, then there is a criminal liability on towards
Right.
of the SVC professional. If there is a negligence, that is a different case. But if they are reporting right, but it happened because they couldn't do anything, that's a different case, right? But the law ensures that what you are reporting is accurate information about the company, right? So this also applies to the various public companies like SOX compliances, which came after Enron, because Enron have created this. Um, they were not reporting the correct numbers to the regulators, and they were kind of manipulating the market. So that's why the regulators have created this the regulatory framework where they say everybody have to report the numbers, and the numbers have to be accurate. Right? So that is the one law.
Sure.
The second law, I think, the privacy laws are different. The privacy laws is that people, the organization, should be able to store and process the individual customer's information in a specific manner. So they want to
Mhm.
make sure that individual customers' informations are protected. It's only used for the purpose it has been used for. It cannot be sold outside if it is not been advised to, if you do not have the direct consent, and if a customer asks you to delete this information, you should delete this information. If customer asks you to provide that information back to them, that how are you using the data, by law in 7 days you have to report back to them. So where this data is used, and they have put a very very heavy penalty. I think the penalty goes to up to 4%. Google
Wow.
has been fined somewhere around close to $1 billion. The Marriott has been fined to $300 million. So the big corporates, the European Union also have kind of like showcased that if you do not follow this, there is a direct penalties and the consequences would be higher. So the privacy
Mhm.
laws and the industry specific regulations are different, and their implementations are different, and they both rely on the data governance principles. And the data governance principles, I think I generally divide those into three principles of the data governance. The one is the information which you are providing to regulators are accurate, right? So that means, how do you make sure this is accurate? The first thing is they want to say that it's traceable to the source of the information. So this is like, if you see any research paper you type, right? Any research paper, the authenticity of the research paper is whenever they put any numbers there, they always cite the source where this get the information from, and where the source
Right.
is, and on the top of the books to books, all the research has been accumulated so far. So that is why you see the source, a lot of social media information is not authentic, because the source information is not traceable. So the information which you provide to the anything regulator, the source should be trackable. That is the number one principle. Number two principle is all the calculation which is happening are documented properly, and there is no the how it is documented, the same the calculations should have. So whatever the documentation is saying, it should be the same formula. Suppose you're saying that 2 plus
Right.
2, we are summing those 2 plus 2 equal to 4. It should be 2 plus 2 equal to 4. It cannot be 5 or 3. You can show that this is my formula, but the calculations are incorrect. So which is more about like calculation, the data quality failure, and those kind of things. The implementation of those is that comes into this. And third information, which is most crucial again, is the definitions are correct. So what you are reporting is actual, the information which you are reporting is the actual information, like the right, is very well described to it. Right? The recent example I generally take with the Twitter, right? The fraud rate. So the Twitter have created, the Elon Musk did a lawsuit on Twitter before acquiring it, because they said, okay, what, you did not describe the fraud rate definitions correctly. So the argument is that the argument was from the Elon Musk side is that you said the fraud rate was less than 5%, but the definition of the fraud rate is, the formula is that they surveyed 100 people, and out of them they found 5 are fraud. That is the
Wow.
very simple way of calculating this, although they can do a very complex analysis to find it out. But if by the assumptions look like they might have done complex analysis to find the figuring out the fraud rate, but the actual implementation was very simple. So those are the regulatory framework which define those three data governance principles, and that's
Mhm.
what how the privacy compliance and industry specific compliance differs. And the security, I think, is well understood, is that you make sure that the data is very well protected with all the different layer of security which is possible. It's not visible to anybody which is not authorized to. And you need to write the policies around within your organization. It have the regulators have not given the specific right to the company that, hey, you should have to go specific that manner. I think they have given the I think the flexibility to the company that they should write their own policy and should make sure the data is nicely protected. And it's organization best interest to protect their own data. If their
Sure.
organization leaked, then obviously you do not want to have that. So I think this is
Of
pretty
course.
much well understood that way.
Right, because you're jeopardizing trust and
Yes.
confidence from your clients, but also internally, what can we rely on the data that we're using, all of that, right? So that makes a lot of sense. How about with the emerging compliances and data methodologies? That last one there. Can you
Yeah.
explain
So
that area a
I
little bit
think,
more?
yeah, so the compliances are not done yet. So now I think yesterday or day before yesterday, even the OpenAI CEO was on the Congress, right? So they are figuring out what is the AI safety laws should be, and how should we create the laws and to kind of come up and then regulate data. So ultimately, they will regulate data. Then how should be what should be the go into the AI model? How should we do it? So these are the emerging compliances which is coming up. Every country is figuring out what should be the how should they try to create the law. So right now, there is obviously the European Union have created the GDPR law for the privacy. California have created, there's a Nevada is creating, the Virginia is creating it, maybe US Fed might create, as well as there are various there are other countries like Argentina have the law. um, I think the New Zealand have the law, the Dubai have the law, right? So they all have the laws. India is
Right,
working on this own laws. So they are all differs a little bit. Like so, they do not copy each other's laws. Their law differs quite a bit, and then implementation is also differs quite a bit. So that is why when I advise customer, I say that do not look at a kind of a only from the GDPR perspective. Look at a privacy perspective. What are the privacy elements are there, and then apply the first do the law implementation at the privacy all the privacy data element perspective, and then the
okay,
laws can be applied on top of it because the new laws will be you will be keep the governments will be writing the new laws regulators, and you have to comply with it. So better to do it in a manner which is the right way rather than,
right.
oh, I just need to protect with the GDPR law, then tomorrow the CCPA law, and they have to reinvent the wheel. You do not want to do that.
Okay, that makes sense. So kind of the idea there is you start with what you know, under what regulations that you are aware of, and then as there's more that are coming out, you kind of build on your policies in that way. Is that sort of the idea?
Yes. So I think the idea is the same, but the when you build the policies, do not build the policy on your data. Build the policies on a generic data, and apply the
Mm,
generic data to your data. That's how the thing is.
interesting.
So if you're putting on the generic data and then you put the policies on top of generic data, because laws will be written on the generic data,
Mhm.
right? The law cannot write that, okay, you have to, because you might store certain information differently than one customer versus another customer. You might store your email address as an email address, or you might also use a primary key of a team, right? For
Right,
example. So the law will not say that, hey, you cannot use, you cannot write on a primary key or on an email field. The law will say all the email address should be obfuscated, for example. So you need to figure out a way that, okay, how do I find my email addresses, how I obfuscate email addresses. So you need to go to
mm,
the individual element level and then say, okay, this is the email address, this is the policy of the email address, and these are the places we have store email addresses within the company, and this is how we should obfuscate. Here we should how should find the email addresses. Here what are the things policies we should apply. So what are the policies are obfuscation, masking, and those are the generally things people will do that part.
okay. That's really helpful. Great insight there, Sharad. Kind of to close out this area here, I was curious, I know we talked about several different pain points and use cases where this defensive data governance comes into play really importantly. Are there any other pain points or use cases that you've seen in your experience that we're addressing with defensive data governance with
So
these kind of four areas in mind?
I think the pain is ability for organization to just um, document all this information. Like, so compliances will make sure that, hey, you need to document your lineage, you need to document your business descriptions, the descriptions of the information. It is quite complex process. So the pain is, how do I do this? There's so much work. So that is where the tools are coming up to leverage those tools to kind of like um, do it automatically. So the like
Right.
Ovaledge works on the automatic lineage extraction from the information. Earlier, I remember that I went to a customer, and they were working for 3 months. They had a whiteboard on literally on that, and they were trying to come. Every data engineer used to come and then type their information in this one.
Oh
three
my
months they
goodness.
were working on it to kind of create the lineage understanding. And again, as they are writing it, and somebody's changing as well, the
Oh
pipelines are
yeah.
changing and something, and it was very, very difficult. And then we implemented over like what like everything is automatic. So kind of that process is the automation is the key for kind of like doing it faster, this
Mm,
compliance activities, because you have the compliance activities is must. You have to do it as
mhm.
otherwise you are out of compliance. The penalties will be applied to you. It's not whether it will be applied, it's when it will be applied,
Right.
right?
Yeah,
So
that
better
makes
you
sense.
document it
That
early.
sounds like a very chaotic situation where those
Yes.
tools can kind of come in handy there for sure. Well, I appreciate your insight on that. I know we talked about, penalties being a huge pain point as well, with not being compliant. And I think that, it's really clear we need a defensive approach when it comes to data governance. Now, I want to kind of jump next into more of that proactive lens. So, the offensive approach to data governance. Can you describe or, kind of summarize these areas that we're seeing here at the bottom of our screen? So, looking at trustworthy data-driven decisions, efficient data engineering, data adoption, and data methodologies. Can you kind of explain
Yes.
to me what we're saying, what we're meaning when we say these areas here?
So if you go 5 years back, nobody will talk about offensive data governance. Everybody will talk about defensive, because the tool doesn't
Mm,
exist, and it takes a long time to document lineage. It takes a long time to document, the all this information. So it was very, very difficult to achieve what we want to do it. But since the tool came into handy, and things become automatic, now these tools can be leveraged for other purpose as well, right? So the
sure,
one of the basic purposes is building the trust of the data, right? So the biggest problem in the organization is that, let's say you created a supply chain optimization module, or any reporting or AI model which you are creating. So as government regulate, all the information need to be accurate, right?
mhm,
The government mandated these information, but is it true for all other decision making processes you are doing within your organization, right? Here on the defense side, the government is mandating you to do it, but in offense side, why not we leverage the same tool to build the trust within your supply chain model? The government will not
right,
say, if you screw up your supply chain model and you create a more inventory, government do not care about it, right? But you will lose a lot of money by creating a lot more inventory, or producing a lot more, or producing less, and the demand, and then competitor is taking the demand, right? So for the same amount of model which you are creating for internal consumption, why not apply the same principles now, as these implementation techniques becomes a commoditized, like the in the process it become automated. So why not leverage it to build the trust within the company? So why not
mm,
have the complete single definition for all the KPIs and metrics and critical data elements you have in your organization, to ensure that you are applying these principles there. So that is where the what used to apply for defense similarly moved to the all various critical data element, where the reports, which is the CFOs are seeing it, or CEOs are seeing it, or supply chain people are seeing it, or optimization people are seeing it. You can go to the top level and you can come down there, right? Apply. So that will create the trust into the company, right?
mhm,
As well as these tools are available, what it also allowing is the lineages are available, everything is available. It allows you to do the efficient data engineering, right? As the business is getting the access to the data much more and more, it will allow you to create efficiency within your data engineering team, because now business have access to the raw data because of the tools. Business have
Right.
access to the final data, which is the reporting tools or something like that. Why
Mm-hmm.
not leverage the source data access to the business, and allow business and ITP team to collaborate together on the source data itself, so that they can create when they create the data pipeline, this is much more efficient and much more faster to develop rather than slow to develop, right? Because
Mm-hmm.
so give you an example, right? So let's say business asks you to develop a data analysis report, and we say, hey, can you create me a inventory reorder report? And then we say, okay, inventory reorder, he will figure it out and we'll create the report. And then he said, no, no, this is not I was looking for. I need this version to be here or that version to be here until the report comes out, right? So then
Right.
he the report, see another report, and then say, so it generally go to 2 or 3 iterations. Now you basically in this reverse scenario is that you basically create a template within the tools that's available, like Ovaledge can help you in that area. Is that say that, hey, Mr. Customer, are you looking for this inventory reorder? Is this the definition? Is this the formula you want? So you can allow them to collaborate together earlier. So now they say, no, no, this is not the formula I want. This is the another formula I want. So they can collaborate early enough rather than development time, because it takes a time to develop and QA and production. So you can save a lot of time there by
Mm-hmm.
avoiding a lot of iteration of that, and do early analysis, early collaboration within the business to do this work. So this will help you a lot of time to do the work much more efficiently. So those are the
Wow.
very
Yeah.
efficient data engineering work is there. And the data adoption is something that as people, you can provide access to almost all the data. So again, the as AI has emerged in a lot of area, so the AI
Mm-hmm.
also helped is in within the data area as well. So now AI can find all the PII private attributes. It can, so if you can find the PII attributes, you can mask the PII attributes. You can not only pass the PII attributes, you can also other confidential information like salary, like any confidential information like a recipe or anything which you do not want to give access to other information. So you can
Mm-hmm.
mask or restrict that information there. So as you have masked and restrict all the information, now you can give access to the data to a lot more people than earlier. It was very only people, the data team was worrying about it. No, we should not give access to a lot more people. Now they can give access because you have masked all the confidential and restricted information from the company. So the data becomes much more adoptable. So adoptable to the business. Now business can collaborate much more easily. So that is where the data governance working as an offense is the policies which you created for your defensive purpose, which government have regulated and something, because of the ability of the tool, it can do much faster. And that's why the same thing can be adopted to improve the data adoption, create efficiency, and build the trust.
Wow, great. No, that's very well said. It really ties together, um, we've we've grown, right? We've expanded, we've evolved, and now we don't have to just react defensively when it comes to data governance. We really can, from the genesis of our experience with data, be able to um, govern it, and with that comes so many benefits. We have a question from the audience here. What is the top benefit that you would say of data governance as offense?
Trust.
Trust.
Yeah. So the trust in the sense that um, people can really believe the data which is coming out, and they can make a decision with the confidence. um, that
Right.
is the number one benefit. Of course, if you have the efficiency, the data team's backlog goes lower. That is all the benefits are there. But ultimately, it builds that if you create a report, let's say for example, after so much effort, I was at the customer, right? Before I started Overledge, we were created a supply chain model. There was, I think, 20 people were involved. We built a new Hadoop model, and it is spent probably close to $3 or $4 million to create the supply chain model, which ultimately created a spreadsheet at the end, which is a very complex, which can tell you which is the plant name, what is the equipment number, and how much you should produce, right? So it's a very complex data pipeline which is created ultimately a spreadsheet. Suppose this spreadsheet is wrong, and its data was not representing right, And most of the time it was happening. No, 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 no. I think there's something wrong with this data. Like people used to, with the supply chain analyst who was sitting on the right, on the different side, they have the intuition. No, no, no. We were producing earlier, so there's something wrong with this model because it's not working
Mm,
because they were doing this earlier with other techniques, right? Which is more like intuitive techniques or with other data calculations. So until unless they can trust on it, they will nobody going to rely on this. If the numbers are not a little bit different or with matches with their previous techniques, because whenever the model is working, it's evolving. You're evolving everything. You're nothing is from the scratch you're building, right?
sure.
People are using supply chain some sort of, but it's all about optimization. It's about doing better and better and better. So the data
Mhm.
allow them to do this work much more faster. And that is where when we applied the data governance principles there, then we realized where the problems are, where the because when you're 20 people were involved, there are a lot of collaboration issues, a lot of definitions was when incorrect, a lot of like those kind of issues comes into it, right? Because when the multiple teams are involved, business, IT, data, right, all the teams are involved, it's create a confusion. And so to remove this
Mhm.
confusion, you need to have the proper definitions, proper documentation of the definition. What is this KPI? What is the metrics? What is supposed to do? What is the formula? What is the, how can I use this formula again? So those are the various things you want to do it and have a consistency layer. And that is where, which creates that, oh, this is like, if you work with the process, the consumer of the data, the report which is creating, which is the VP of supply chain, he can get the
Mhm.
decision much more confidence with that.
Mm. Yeah, and confidence is so key for anyone in the business, right?
Yes,
Across the map.
yes.
Um, yeah, great insights there, Sharad. I really appreciate that. I kind of wanted to jump in here now to, can we talk a little bit about the starting point, right? Where's the best place to start? We're talking about a defensive approach, we're talking about offense. I can't help but think about soccer or some sport, where you've got these two different teams operating independently, but also together. Where do we start when it comes to data governance? Do we, like you said, we originally had defensive as more of that approach. Is that still where we're starting? In this new era where we have technologies, where do we want to begin when it comes to data governance?
Yeah, I think the area for financial utilities, financial companies, and healthcare companies, mostly I think the financials are the number one use case for them is a defense. For healthcare, for utilities, for government, for certain companies maybe more around offense because they do not have many regulations. The financial is very regulatory industry, right? So they have to start from a defense. They must start from defense. But let's say that you are a tech startup, technology startup. So we have various customers who are the technical companies who are mostly like cutting edge. They are not a very big corporation, but they have a lot of data because
Mhm.
they're next generation companies. They are mostly doing it for offense and offense because they want to do the data engineering right. They want to create efficiency into this. But most of the banking, financials, insurance, they are mostly going for defense and they're moving to our offense, right? So
Mhm.
I think the best way to again about depending upon the company to company, but if you have a need for defense, if you have a regulatory environment, start with the defense and then move to offense. But if you are not a regulatory industry, most of tech companies, etc., you can start as offense as well. Efficient data engineering is a, as well as building a trust in the ecosystem is a very fruitful benefit to gain from the data
And is the
governance.
idea to keep these efforts, the individuals involved in these different efforts, separate or have them work
No,
together?
it is a one department. So for example, uh, let's say it's the same skills, right? Now it's come to
Mhm.
the soccer, right? It's the same skill, which is passing the ball from one person to another person, right? The skills are same, but when you come to the defense side, the skills are more like it's different, that we have to protect you, but the offense side you have to put into the goal, right? So
Mm.
the skills are the same, but your objectives are different, right? Objectives are offense is different, defense is different. So same thing is that the skill set and the process you will establish is the same, but on the data which you work upon, like for the defense, you will work on the PII data to block,
Mhm.
right? To kind of this one. While on the offense side, you will work on the confidential data to protect. Of course, you will work on the PII data, but the confidential data as well as all the more restrictive data to work upon, so that you can protect it, so that you can give access to the more data, more people. Similar to this, when you are creating a framework for documenting all this information, then it's there you will be working for the call reports, which goes to the regulatory reports, which goes out from the department to from the company to outside regulators. Now you will work
Mhm.
for the reports which is going to the not to the regulator, but the CFOs and CEOs and the VP of analyst, or any some supply chain analyst, or any optimization module, or the manufacturing optimization, or whatever the people are doing it for, the whatever the data benefits they are doing. They want to establish the data governance principle in those processes, right?
Mm.
So the processes are the same for data governance, but which data you apply with it, that defines whether it's a defensive technique or offensive.
Okay, that makes a lot of sense. That's helpful and kind of clarifying some of the skills right involved in both of these approaches are they overlap, right? And somebody
Yes.
in the audience, I think, asked, it says, what are the basic data skills which can be transferred from doing defense to offense? Can you explain that in any more detail? I think you touched on it just now, but
Yeah.
um,
So the basic
any other
skills.
specific skills?
Yeah. So there are three. I think the when you say skill is in terms of the soccer, but when you come about the data governance, this is about the process of the data governance, right? What are the steps you do to make sure the data is good, high quality, right? So the process you follow is again the three processes. One is uh, the making sure the data is coming from the right source, authentic source,
Yeah.
which happens through the data lineage, through that, making sure the all the information which is represented in high quality, in the sense that all the numbers which is coming up, there is no problem, or data pipeline is not broken anywhere, because ultimately the
Mhm.
data is getting calculated from variety of systems and then goes to ultimately reach to the end consumer. So all the
Mhm.
pipeline and the data quality basically plays a very important role. And the third part is the definitions are are consistent across the company, at least, if not across the organization, across the world, but at least in your company, you have not multiple definition for the same metrics, right? That is the
Mm.
very key part which you have to develop. Especially a lot of companies work with the merger and acquisitions or something. They other company follow different naming nomenclature. This company follow different naming nomenclature. How do you consolidate this and bring into one? So
Mhm.
those are three major principles of the data governance, which generally we call it is data literacy, data quality, data access, right? That kind of thing. But that's the three major principles which the data can be ensured it's a trustworthy data, it's a high quality data.
Awesome. Great. Thank you for that. I want to get to a couple other questions that we have here in the chat box, but I was curious, if you could give any recommendation. I know we were talking a little bit earlier about we have defensive tools and technologies. Do you recommend having separate technologies to help with both your defensive and offensive data governance approach, um, or not? What would your personal recommendation be? What have you seen be successful? Any kind of synergies between these use cases and approaches that you've seen work?
So the worst, so the one thing is happening across the data industry is people are people are creating a data architecture for their
Mhm.
organization, right? So the people have the business which they want to transform, right? For example, um, every company is going through some sort of a digital transformation journey, right? As they are going through the digital transformation journey at some point of time, there is a big part of that is the data, right? How they will leverage the data for their own benefit. So there is a business strategy directly defined that this we will use this data for supply chain optimization. We will use this data for my finding the new cancer research or whatever the data they have, right? So they will use for some purpose of the data which they have put it, and they put together a budget for that. So that is like there is there. Now what the organization are starting to realize is that the first thing, they need an infrastructure to control this data. So they're on the infrastructure side, they have to purchase some technology where they can house all the data, like storage and the processing of the data. So that is the one part of this. And the second part is, once you do it, you need to visualize the data. You need some utility tool to visualize it, to represent it better, right? So that is the so those are the, you need some sort of a tool to process the data in terms of machine learning, AI, and something. So those are tools or platform, you can call it, right? And then you need a platform and a tool to govern the data, right? To ensure that when we say govern the data, there's all these principles are is protected, it's well described, it's high quality, and all these tools is there. So now within the tool also, when you now say, since there are multiple technologies already involved, if you use a different technology, each individual component for governance as well, it is too much to manage.
Right.
So we recommend to use one tool which can do many things in the governance area, right? Which can do data quality, which can do data, business glossary, data cataloging. All these tools should be one approach rather than buying 5 different tools for doing the data governance. It becomes too difficult. Then you have to integrate everything together, and
Sounds
becomes too
expensive
difficult,
as well.
and as well as expensive. So even though the cost of software may be the same, but then the cost of integration goes higher, cost of maintenance goes much more higher.
Sure.
So maintain the tool, which is only one all-in-one kind of tool, which can use and do all this work for you for the data governance activities.
Yeah.
And
Absolutely.
so that's the main part, which is kind of neat to do.
Awesome. That makes a lot of sense, and it definitely makes sense with even what you were sharing about, bridging defensive and offensive data governance, that there is overlap there. So it makes sense to have a tool where you can address both sides in one place. So I appreciate that recommendation. We have a couple of questions in the chat. We've got 3 minutes left, and I wanted to ask first, we have one from an anonymous LinkedIn user who's asking, what would be the ROI from treating data governance as offense? Would it be easy to measure? Can you go into some detail about that?
I think the measurement would be not that difficult. The reason is that, again, we advise customers to just measure, for example, how are you doing now? What kind of backlog you have? Suppose you are already running a data engineering group. What kind of backlog you have? What kind of satisfaction score you have, right? And let's say you implement data governance for 1 year or 1.5 years, and then after that you can say the same thing, what kind of backlog you have and what kind of the customer satisfaction you have. So you will directly gain the benefit after that, after 1 year of implementation of it, is where you will have a significant less backlog because of it will become efficiency, as well as your customers are happy. So this is so that's where you can calculate the return on investment. Yes, there are various ways to calculate that, but this is a genuinely authentic data, which will be easy to produce the authenticity for the ROI. It's we have done we have asked Forrester, which is which is pretty large consulting organization, hey, do the study on us to kind of like all customer base. And they did the study, and they found that like if you invest $1, you get a $4 in return, like in a year time frame. So that is the ridiculous benefit data governance provide, that like I don't think any technology provides that benefit. And this is just the benefit of the data governance by productivity gain. What you are not counting is what is the cost of the decisions, right? Suppose you have avoided a bad decisions, then that is a different ball game altogether. So this is just the productivity gain is this much, but the overall area is when you can have a speed to market, that cost is at another level, which is I don't think that can be measured, because it's very difficult to measure because people generally, like for example, people buy a company because it's not that Microsoft doesn't have the tools to build the AI engine, but because they wanted to invest into OpenAI because they want to do it speed to the market, right? So that is
Sure.
where, so every organization, suppose there is a one financial organization versus another, yes, they have the tool to bring to the data model and speed to the market, but whoever comes first, they're going to capture the market. So that benefit is just not captured anywhere in the data governance, the ROI return on that part.
Gotcha. Great explanation there. I'm going to just close this out with one more question we've got from Aditi. And it says, how can data governance frameworks adapt to the challenges or security issues posed by emerging technologies like edge computing or decentralized data storage? Can you speak to that at all?
So security is another aspect of the data governance, right? So whether it's edge computing or decentralizing data storage, as much decentralization is happening, um, more and more data governance is important because you have to centralize the governance, right? If the storage is decentralized, if the computing is decentralized, then what is needed to be centralized is the governance. If you do not do the centralization of the governance, um, then then things will be just exploding everywhere. People will be just building their own standards, whether it's a storage
Right.
or the computing on the one side. So that is why the governance have to be the central, and it should prescribe the security standards, what every edge computing as well as decentralized what should follow, and it must follow those. Otherwise, it will be very very difficult to govern it because
Mhm.
there's a lot more and more decentralization is happening after the centralization there is a one for the analytics. You have to centralize it because you cannot compute the data by putting the data at different places. It is just physically is not possible. If the data is
Mhm.
at 5 places, you want to sum that number, you have to bring it someplace. So the centralization is mandatory by the nature of the physics of the laws of the physics, right? So
Sure.
it cannot be confirmed. But there are use cases which can be governed by the decentralization. But in that decentralization use case, for the security reason, the governance is the policies for the governance is must to be centralized. It's very very difficult to do it otherwise.
That makes a lot of sense. It kind of goes in line with what you were saying earlier about the most important benefit, right, of all of this is trust around our data. So if you don't start there, then you're kind of chaos ensues, right? Or it's so easy to have things get out of control. Am I right in kind of thinking that?
Yeah,
Yeah.
exactly.
Great insight, Sharad. I think we're going to have to wrap up here. We've got some great questions. If we weren't able to get to your question, we're going to respond to you individually. And, again, I wanted to just mention that we do have a lot of what we discussed today during this LinkedIn Live in a blog post on our website. And that's also going to be attached again here in the chat. So thank you everyone again for joining. If you have any further lingering questions or you want to learn more about Ovaledge specifically, please don't hesitate to reach out. Thank you, Sharad, for your insight and recommendations for explaining this defensive and offensive approach to data governance. I think it provides a lot of helpful insight for our viewers and definitely for me. So I appreciate your time today and thank you everyone for joining. Thanks so much.
Thank you, everyone, and it's always lovely to have these
Awesome.
podcasts. Thanks, Joanna.
All right, talk soon. Thanks.